Hey everybody, it's Mike from AMZ Advisors, and today I have with me Peter O'Sullivan from Highbeam Analytics, and we're going to talk about managing and making sense of data for e-commerce brands. Hey Peter, how are you doing?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being here with us today.
Great to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your company?
I early in my career was kind of a corporate guy. Worked for General Electric and Pacific Bell, some big companies, and got that experience. And then later on, last 15 years, I've been doing consulting specifically around turnarounds and working with large and small companies. And in that process, became very good and very reliant on measuring performance in companies and figuring out really good, fast ways to measure performance. And that's basically how Highbeam Analytics came to be. I realized that the better you can measure performance along the way, the better you can execute. And I'd rather not be in the business of turning around businesses. I'd rather be in the business of helping businesses succeed beyond where they're at. So that's kind of how I got here.
Exactly. And then what was your background in e-commerce prior to starting Highbeam?
So e-commerce specifically is, I actually, most recently I ran a smaller company. It was $20 million, which is large to a lot of companies, but I had run some, largest P&L was 200 million. But in the e-commerce space, we were doing Amazon, Shopify, and then we also had over 100 brick and mortar retailers. So we're spread across all those three different channels. And that's really where Highbeam came up. I found that trying to track all of those customers and all of the sales and all of the inventory was just really challenging and overwhelming, even for a guy that had been living that world for 15 years. This has just got to be completely overwhelming. So I was trying to figure out what a solution would be.
Okay. And I completely understand just trying to make sense of all the data you see. We have the same problem with our clients a lot of times. But how does Highbeam solve that problem, and how is it unique compared to other products that are in the space?
So there's a whole new generation of products that are coming to market today that are phenomenal. It started, some of the earlier products were Tableau, for example, and Looker, which are now billion-dollar organizations, and they are terrific tools. There's Microsoft has a tool called Power BI. These are all business intelligence tools, and basically they pull data from different sources and give you the ability to do analytics, number crunching, right, and then present it in either table or really great, powerful graphic ways. Those are all awesome places to be. The valuations on those companies are great. It's just the wave of the future. It's where business is going. The problem is when you're a smaller organization, you're kind of left to yourself in terms of how do I set this thing up and how do I make it work? You've got to pay for the license fee. You've got to hire the data scientists. You've got to understand how to pull the data from the databases. You may have a series of other applications that you're trying to pull data from. It just gets to be overwhelming. And that is actually where I found myself, was how do I put all this stuff together? And I didn't see a solution that was out there. And so that's where Highbeam Analytics came in. As I said, why don't we figure out a way to pre-create a lot of the reports that we already know we need. We need to know what cost of goods is. We need to know what our sales are. We need to know what our advertising cost is. There's a lot of stuff that every e-retailer, every distribution company already needs to know. What if we pre-create those reports right out of the gate as a SaaS model? So it's a subscription model. So you don't have this big investment, and you basically make the decision as a smaller organization, say under 50 million in revenues, I'm going to outsource this. I may at some point want to bring it in-house, but for now, I'm going to outsource this and give it to a company that already lives and breathes this business and this environment and already has the tools in place. I can get up and running tomorrow, and I'm ready to go, and I start driving value right from the get-go, and I don't have all that the burden of trying to put the whole system together myself.
Okay, interesting. And how complicated is it for a business to get started into this type of data analytics or implementing this themselves?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think that's one of the things that a lot of us get get nervous about is, as soon as, I mean, when you say data analytics, right away you think of complicated, and it's true. In the background, there's a lot of complication. There's a lot of detail that has to be managed. We know that that is the issue that our clients are trying to get away from. They're trying to simplify their life, not complicate it. So we have designed both our business model and the tools that we use to be as simple as possible. A company, for example, we'll do a pretty detailed evaluation before we bring them on as a client, just to make sure we can deliver. That's the first thing. The second thing is we do all the heavy lifting. I have my lead data scientist has got a PhD in physics. I mean, these are really, really smart people. They do all of that complicated work behind the scenes. We get to the database, we get to the data, we do all that setup for you, and you turn the switch on. The most complicated thing is really taking you through the reports and helping you understand how these reports work. Sometimes it's a new world in terms of seeing the visualization of data. It's really a mind-opening experience for a lot of companies. You just see the light bulbs go off. But there's a curve. You need to get on and you need to understand how these reports work. And I work very hard at making sure it follows a logical workflow. So somebody gets on and knows I go from this to this to this, and then I've got the answer that I need. So we really work hard at making sure it's as simple and straightforward as possible.
Okay, great. And what's that type of workflow that you take the customer through to understand their business better? What types of reports are they looking at? What are the the problems that they're trying to solve with the reports that you're giving them?
So I am a huge advocate of predictive forecasting. And that's the name of the company is Highbeam, intentionally, right? So it's about looking at where you're going. So this is actually the reason why there's a new workflow is typically this is not something that most small business owners, and when I say small, like I say, like under 50 million, for some companies that may be very big, but if you're a $20 million organization and that's mostly where you've spent your career, predictive forecasting is not something you're usually used to. You're usually guessing what the future might be. You may forecast something based on some basic analytics, but real deep analytical predictive forecasting is a new technology to most people. I can tell you that most of us are using this all the time when we hit Google Maps and we want to go from here to there. That tool is actually predicting when you'll get there. So we actually are engaged in this all the time. We just don't know it. And that's the idea. So if you think about that, this is going to be kind of a new workflow in that you're going to start by looking at where the company is headed, where the analytics are telling you it looks like you're headed. And that would be, where your sales are per channel, what your revenues are going to be overall in the year. That forecast is the first thing that you would look at to see, is this matching what I expect? And then, for example, one of the next things I would do as a consultant is then you'd stick a budget to that forecast and you'd start working your business around both a budget that meets the forecast and then tracking what that forecast might be. So that's a kind of a simple look at what a new workflow might be. It is very simple. It's just that it's novel. So there is an educational part in terms of how are you now running your organization that's different than you may have been doing it in the past.
How does Highbeam help a company understand its cash flow?
Yeah, so really good question. So cash flow is and can be a pretty complicated thing. There's a couple of key components to cash flow. So first of all, we know how much cash is coming in. When we do the predictive forecasting, we know how much your sales, we forecasted your sales by channel. So if you're sitting on Shopify, we've got a Shopify sales forecast by unit, by SKU. At a granular level, we know exactly where we're predicting you're going to go. That doesn't mean you're going to go there, but we want to start with a prediction that has a degree of credibility. We know where your Amazon business is going to go. That actually is one of the first places Highbeam was designed around, is predicting the forecast and the sales for Amazon. So your sales starts to tell you when cash is going to show up. And in e-retail, and e-commerce, that's a great place to be because that's a relatively simple model. When you're providing terms to brick and mortar, it gets more complicated. Easy to do mathematically, but it's just another level of complication. So we're going to put that aside for the second. Let's just pretend that you're just an e-retailer. Your cash flow in is very predictable because we know the terms and we know how quickly you get paid. The next piece is your overhead. I'm going to go from simple to more complex. The next piece is overhead. Owners have a tremendous amount of control or predictability around overhead. We know when your rent is due, you know when insurance is due, you know what salaries you're paying, all of those overhead costs, SG&A, the below the gross income line, that all is relatively predictable as well. The challenge is in your cost of goods, which is when you're buying product, when it's coming in, when you have to pay for that product, and then, like we said, when you're going to sell it, when it's going to go out. That is where we have spent a tremendous amount of energy and effort at understanding the demand forecast. So we know when you should be buying new product. We'll know your terms by your vendor and when that cash will go out, and when that replenishment will be required. And that is the most complicated part of the whole system, and one of the pieces that we pre-created because we know everybody's going to be interested in understanding what their cash flow forecast is going to be. And we predict out 12 months. So your 12 months is going to be the least accurate. Next month is going to be the most accurate. We're looking at monthly, not necessarily weekly, but monthly chunks. So as a prediction gets closer and closer, it gets more and more accurate because you have better data points and you just have less variability based on the time frame.
Okay. And one of the other things that we talked about offline that you helped me understand was the value of demand planning and how the software can help you plan your inventory better. So once you understand your cash flows and your forecasts and even what your future sales are predicted to be, what types of results can you get when it comes to actually managing your inventory better?
So I have a model. As a matter of fact, I put together a little video called the inventory manager's dilemma, which is, do I have too much inventory or I have too little? So, and what are the costs associated? And we all know in general that too much is not good and too little is not good. Too little is the ultimate crime because you're losing sales. So you've spent all this energy and effort and money on your marketing to go get that customer. You brought them to the door. They're ready to click on, I want to buy your product, and you don't have inventory there. So that is just the worst sin. So, and inventory managers know that. So they will typically, as a result, over order. And that isn't the worst sin. It's the second worst sin because over ordering is putting cash on a shelf when you're a cash negative business. E-retailers, e-commerce, retailers in general, that is a cash negative, meaning you have to put the cash out before you get the cash in. Warren Buffett likes to invest in insurance companies because they get the cash first and then they spend the cash later. So he likes cash positive businesses. If you're in this space, you're a cash negative business. So you have to be really careful. And I think it's really important to make this one of your core competencies, to really understand how to manage that inventory. The inventory manager's dilemma is, how do I avoid spending too much, ordering too much inventory when I know my worst sin is to run out of inventory? So you're trying to thread that needle. And the trick is we're typically letting or we're delegating this to an inventory manager that they see units, they don't see dollars, and they're doing the best they can with whatever tool you've provided for them, whatever insight you've provided. And if you haven't given them predictive forecasting right out of the gate, you have not given them every possible opportunity to be successful in inventory management. And I'm a guy that's walked into companies and looked at inventory totals. Right now, when we go do evaluations on companies, right out of the gate, we can see how much excess inventory they have. The balance sheet may not show how much excess inventory you have. In other words, I may look at a balance sheet and see that the inventories look pretty balanced based on the sales, right? So I've got $1 million in inventory and I got 10 million in sales. That's not too bad a ratio. But when you go into the granular detail of every single item, you start to see I've got too little of this and I got too much of that. It's just inevitable. It's it is literally mathematically impossible to get this leveled up, to get it optimized without having this predictive component to it. So what we're really looking at is, what are your sales? What are your historical sales? What do we predict the sales will be going forward? And how much inventory do we think we need based on safety stock levels, based on lead time demand, based on all these inventory calculations that we can do in just a millisecond, that it'll take your inventory manager, and may take them hours and hours and hours if they have the skill to do it.
Okay, that's very helpful to hear. Do you have any examples of companies that have made mistakes not managing their inventory properly? Is this pretty common, where they fall into cash flow issues or have challenges actually operating their business?
Well, I mean, early on, we actually worked with a company, and I went through 3 years. So we typically try and grab at least 3 years of data. 4 years tends to be too historical. Things have changed. But for 3 years, you get seasonality, you get market trends, and you can see where there are some anomalies. There was a company that we saw that they had hired an e-retail, e-commerce VP. This was the big push. And so they pre-purchased a ton of inventory, and they were never able to get traction on the e-commerce side. They had been a brick and mortar retailer. And so they were just sitting on tons and tons of inventory. And we knew that they knew they had excess inventory. And that's typically what you see is, yeah, I know I get some extra inventory, but it just hasn't sold, and it will. So I'm not worried. It's a hot model. It will. But the problem is, once you start looking at the data in a really granular way, and the way you do that is through visualization. Once you see the visualization, you see how much excess inventory you have. It really changes. You can see, I live in a business where I see people's facial reactions change. They see what they didn't see before and go, oh my God, look at all that. And we actually quantify that excess inventory in terms of dollars, which is comment I made earlier, is inventory managers work on units, which is good. They're not financial analysts, so I don't know that you want your inventory manager to work on dollars. They work on units. We convert that to dollars, so you can see how much excess dollars are sitting on your shelf. And we really emphasized to owners and managers that all that inventory is basically, think of a stack of dollars, and every day one of the dollars leaves that stack. So when it's sitting on a shelf, it is never getting adding value. I make a joke about, unless you're selling really good wine or exotic cars, your inventory is reducing value every single day. And it's true. I have a background in Six Sigma and Lean Six Sigma. They teach you that inventory holding only reduces value over time. So we want to make sure that you're not carrying too much inventory. And we actually give you a measure that says, this is how much excess inventory you're keeping. You can decide whether it's excess or not, but according to our calculations, we'll tell you exactly how much excess inventory. And one of the funnest things that we do, one of the reasons why we put it in there, is not only is it useful, but when you're investing in a data analytics platform, you're expecting to try and quantify, am I getting my dollars back? And to show a company with $1 million of inventory, and literally 6 months later, they'll have $300,000 in excess inventory, is a mind bend for folks. And it really shows the value of having this kind of insight into your inventory right out of the gate. When you can put $700,000 back in your bank in cash, beyond just the efficiencies you're going to get, it makes you very happy you've invested in this kind of technology.
Well, that sounds very helpful for companies to be able to save money on, not tying up their cash in excess inventory. But what kind of results can your clients typically see from using Highbeam Analytics to optimize their inventory levels?
Well, so it's going to be a wide range. It depends on the company. Some companies are really good at certain things. Some companies, they're struggling in other things. One of the issues for a lot of companies is when they introduce new products, they're trying to figure out how much inventory to have and whether they're going to have turns and what their forecast would be on new products. So we've got a solution for that. But what we really expect is, and actually our system pricing is derived around making sure you get a really good return on investment. we do a fairly good assessment up front about what your company is, what size it is, what kind of products you have, whether there's opportunity for data analytics to begin with. It doesn't do me any good to start a company and them not see the results out of the investment. You get a subscription, but at the end of the day, you need to have happy customers. We all know that. So just like you, customers that buy your product that aren't happy, you just want to do whatever you can to take care of them. You don't want them buying your product if they're not going to be happy. But for a $5 million e-retailer, e-commerce company, we should expect to see 3 to 5% improvement in overall profitability. That could push all the way down to the net income level. When you start getting up to 10 or $20 million, it can go either way. Sometimes when you get to 10 million or 20 million, you've really got your systems designed and your processes in, so it's harder to squeak that extra profit. For other companies, it's actually easier because they're getting just overwhelmed and they're getting less efficient as they grow, which is really most of the types of organizations that get referred to a data analytics platform. Is they know they're getting overwhelmed. They know they've got lots of information, but they're not able to kind of put it together and understand where they're losing money and where they're making money. So we expect to see, again, anywhere from 2 to 3%, 4% improvement in net income as a result of data analytics. And if we don't have a high degree of confidence that we can do that, we'll share it with you. I mean, we'll look at your data and we'll look at what you're doing. I have a fairly deep background in business, both business analytics and business operations. It's not really very difficult to kind of get a pretty good estimate of where you're efficient, where you're not. And a lot of times the clients already know it. They know they're spending money in areas that they don't think they're getting a result from. We just validate that and help them make better decisions, because now you've got analytical proof that your hunch was accurate.
Okay. So do you think something like predictive analytics and Highbeam, for example, is a tool that a lot of companies can use to replace other software they have, like ERPs or other inventory management? Or do you see that they're more of a complement to those tools?
Yeah, so really good question, because it is not it's not lost on me. I've said this more than once, that adding another software product when you're already overwhelmed with a bunch of software products it seems kind of counterintuitive. We have designed this specifically to enhance your existing tools. We don't want you to have to change your workflow. You've put and invested a lot of energy in training your people, in using the tools. You've thought about them. I know I've been through the process of buying software, the evaluation, the vendor choices. The last thing I want to do is say, you know what, you can't use that tool, it doesn't work with Highbeam. So we want to complement what you already have and minimize the disruption and maximize the benefits. So the answer is, we're not looking for you to replace. We're not trying to displace an existing tool. The only exception would be if you've already started using business intelligence software and it's not working, that can be the case as well, because it's very complicated, and trying to put the pieces together, you may find that you just bit off more than you could chew. We're happy to replace that and get that problem solved for you quickly. But if you're using an existing tool, if you're on an ERP, we have clients that have ERPs. Our demand forecasting, I know, I'm not bragging, I know it's better than what, for example, Oracle's even designed for NetSuite, because I use NetSuite. I know their demand planning. They have some features that are really excellent that we can't match. But in terms of the predictive forecasting and the AI and machine learning, there's no one that's better than we are on that side of it, because that's where we really invest our time, is adding that value that it's going to be virtually impossible for you to be able to build yourself. An ERP is an operational system. It's in the now. It's how much do I order? What's my purchase order? It's a process-driven software. Those are needed to run your business. We are not a process-driven software. We are a predictive tool. We're an information tool. So we occupy a different space in the overall software world, in that most of your tools are process-driven. They're about running your company. And if it's accounting, it's how did I do? Accounting is historical. So you have accounting, which is historical. You have ERPs, and even managing Amazon and and other tools along the way, CRM. These are all typically in the now. And how do I manage my operation? We are in the information and prediction and how do we deliver good information to you so you make better decisions. We're in that unique space that complements your existing operations.
Okay, awesome. That's very helpful. I think one of the things that a lot of companies struggle with, and we see it with our clients, is just staying in stock, staying on top of their inventory, and then sometimes they get too much inventory on Amazon and they're freaking out trying to get it out so they don't get all these fees. Coming into Q4 now, this is obviously the biggest time of the year for e-commerce, and the growth is more and more every year in that space. Do you have any tips or advice for companies to help manage their inventory or prepare their inventory levels for Q4?
So the first thing is any forecast is better than no forecast. So even if you're not using data analytics, if you're a $2 million business and it's just too big a leap for you to make today, it's better to try and get something out there. And the analogy I use is if you're driving, I use the Highbeam analogy, which is if you're driving your car on a nice straight road, you know where you're going, and if there's no traffic, you know how to get there. You don't need a Google Maps, right? You're going to get there at 60 miles an hour. You can do the calculation. Those are simple. It's when you have a windy road, or you have traffic, you have other things that are coming up, that prediction is more important than ever. And even if you use a rudimentary, if you use Excel, I don't mean to rudimentary isn't to put it down. It's just the level of sophistication is going to be world different between the two. But even if you're using Excel and you're using, for example, you're overlaying what your seasonality is, and you've got some prediction, that gives you a baseline to know where you're going. And when you get to that baseline and you're not on track, you get to understand the gap right away. So just this thinking about where you're going forward and having someone kind of pre-plan exactly what your inventory would be is really important, just to be given a heads up right away that you're off track. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have the Chinese New Year coming up again. And I don't know a company that has navigated through that gap in production without some degree of stress. It's always, every year it starts coming up. People start thinking about the Chinese New Year and how we're not going to get deliveries. And everybody kind of, that is that's the toughest prediction I think we make, is we have Christmas and we have Chinese, like it just comes at a perfect storm. So think about where you're going. That's back to the prediction. Think about where this gap is going to be. And if you've done the first forecast, then understand that you're not going to get replenishment. And I know if you've been in this business more than 1 year, you already know this is coming. I'm just kind of stressing you out so you know it's coming. You can be prepared for it. And the third thing is convert your inventory to cash. Convert your inventory to dollars. Your inventory manager is looking at units. And here's the bottom line. When an inventory manager comes and tells you, look what a great job I'm doing, they're typically going to measure on turns per unit. How many turns? So if I've got 12 turns, I've got that unit turning over every month. And that's a good number. That's perfectly fine. The problem is, even though that could be a good KPI, it can be really deceiving. Because if you have slow turns on a product that creates a great deal of gross margin and great cash flow versus high turns on a product that has low margins and low cash flow, you're not looking at the right performance metric to make sure you're maximizing and optimizing your company. So I want you to make sure that you're looking at inventory and inventory terms in terms of dollars and gross margin, in particular gross margin, rather than just units. You can use both, but understand you need to attach inventory performance metrics to gross margin and how much contributing, what I call contributing margin, that product or that SKU or that product group is providing to your company. That's where you get really good performance.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks for explaining all that. All right, so Peter, a lot of our audience are Amazon sellers. Maybe they're not at that level where they're doing $5 million a year on the platform, or across all channels, they're not doing $5 million a year. What types of strategies would you recommend to them outside of being able to buy a product that can do the predictive analytics for them?
Yeah, so that's a vast majority of Amazon sellers are, they're not in the space where business intelligence makes sense. There are some really inexpensive tools. Power BI has, by Microsoft, has a free version that you can go look at, and my recommendation would be, first of all, everybody uses Excel. Get used to being able to find your data and put it into an Excel model. Excel is wonderful. The analogy I make, though, is business intelligence tools are like a jet airplane, and Excel is like a little prop airplane. It's relatively easy to fly. I'm a pilot, so I think they're easy to fly. Versus a jet, it's complicated. It's got pressurized systems, and it's just they're order of magnitude different. But Excel does the job and has some really powerful data tools embedded in Excel. Excel has gone way beyond what it used to be back in the day. So using Excel is a great tool. My most important advice is understand that you want to invest in this competency. Someday you'll get to the point where business intelligence software makes more sense. And you can kind of step through that using Power BI. And Tableau, I think, has a free version. So you can start to play with it that way. And there's some very inexpensive tools out there. But start to understand as a company that this needs to be your core competency and invest in it. Don't shirk it off as something I just need a report on, but think about an investment, kind of a capital investment over time. So over the next 3 years, we're going to get really good at this. And at some point, we may want to move to a business intelligence platform. But for the time being, I want to build models. I want to invest in this and not make it just can you throw a report together, but think about how you're going to structure it and make sure that this becomes what you do for a living. It is as important as understanding your advertising spend, your ROAS, all of the things that you now know as an e-retailer that you need to understand. The data analytics needs to be your core competency. Jeff Bezos built Amazon on two things. There was a PBS series on our Frontline series, and he said there were two pieces they looked at. They looked at making sure the customers were super happy and data. Those were the two elements. So if Jeff Bezos thinks data is important and you're on his platform, you may want to consider that as well. I don't like that Amazon knows more about your business than you do. And think of that as your bar, is you want to make sure you know more about your own business than Amazon does. That's a journey. So it's going to take you some investment and being very purposeful about how you do this to get there. But think of it as one of your top strategic priorities, is making sure that data analytics, even if it's done on Excel, becomes a core competency of your business.
Yeah, I think that's really a great piece of advice for businesses that are just starting out and starting to achieve scale, and a good way to start building going forward. Yeah,
when we run into experts, I've over the years become an expert. We all start with nothing. We all start with ignorance, right? We all start not knowing anything, and you build and build and build and build. And that's really the journey you need to be on. It's just understand that this is what you need to learn. This is where you're headed. It'll increase the value when you want to sell your business. If that's your exit strategy, it'll increase your profitability all along the way. It actually makes your life simpler. It reduces your stress. I mean, it's just, there's no downside to it, but it just takes purposeful energy to make sure you understand that this is a priority and where you need to be. That's really my mission. Is I want people to be able to use data analytics to improve the quality of their life. And you can do it, like I say, you can do it on Excel. Excel is a wonderful tool. When your really good Excel person leaves, you got a problem. But if you document well and you structure it well, you can have that transition and still work the problem.
Awesome. Well, it's been really great to hear all of this from you. If any of our audience want to get in touch with you, or maybe even get a demo of Highbeam, where's the best place to get in touch with you or reach you?
So our website is highbeamanalytics.com, and even if you're not a buyer, I'm more than happy. Like I say, I honestly have a passion for this. I love this business. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but data analytics is both creative and analytical. And if you're kind of have that creative mind, it can be a source of expression, of business expression. I am happy to help anybody out there that just needs some advice. So just reach out to me. There's a calendar link. You can just get half hour of my time. No strings attached. Happy to help you out in any way I can.
Awesome. I think our audience will really appreciate that. been great speaking with you, Peter. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. I really enjoyed it.